now. Thank you again to everybody who has shared their name, their school, and their student organization affiliation in the chat to introduce themselves. It's really wonderful to have all of you here with us tonight. To give you an idea of what we've got planned for this evening, here are the topics we'll be tackling during our hour together. After intros, we've got what is building decarbonization, followed by Chicago's retrofit program and energy benchmarking ordinance, then electrifychicago.net, projects already in the works, and we'll end with some brainstorming and action items. So let's get right down to it. I am Rachel Fredericks. I used to be an ethics professor, but in 2021, I resigned, partly because I felt compelled to commit more of myself to climate activism. So now, among other things, I'm the leader of just one of many all-volunteer teams at the Climate Reality Project's Chicago Metro chapter. Globally, Climate Reality has over 3.5 million people working together to build a just and sustainable, true net zero future. Our chapter of Chicago area activists have been working to catalyze local solutions to the climate crisis since 2017. Now, in 2021, before I even lived here, our chapter started a team focused on climate policy. Initially, that was led by my awesome teammate, Florida. Using their awesome policy expertise, the team did great work developing recommendations for the city's climate action plan, among other things. But starting in May 2023, our team has been focused on building decarbonization. So tonight's first goal is to shed some light on exactly what this means. And I should say now, there will be multiple chances for asking questions later, but feel free to post your questions in the chat as they arise so you don't forget. Okay, here we go. The buildings where we live, work, and play are one of many, many, many sources of greenhouse gas emissions, which drive climate change. When we heat and cool our buildings, cook food, do laundry, shower, turn on lights, charge our phones, and so on, we use energy for all of those activities. And sometimes we get that energy by burning fossil fuels in our buildings themselves, like when we have a gas-burning furnace, stove, or water heater. Other times, we get energy from off-site electricity generation, like coal-burning power plants. Boo! Wherever they happen, if fossil fuels are involved, these activities contribute to climate chaos. And just a quick side note here, we're only going to talk tonight about emissions that come from energy usage in buildings, not about the emissions embedded in the building materials themselves. Okay, so the good news is that buildings can be, as we say, decarbonized. There are all sorts of things we can do to reduce the energy that we use and the greenhouse gases that we emit by what we do in our buildings. So these decarbonization activities fall into three main categories. One involves making buildings more efficient so they waste less energy and generate fewer emissions. Classic examples of efficiency upgrades include improving insulation, weather stripping doors, and installing more efficient windows and lights. These kinds of efficiency upgrades, especially insulation, are often the low-hanging fruit, the things that should be done before you pursue another decarbonization strategy, namely electrification. Building electrification involves switching out anything that burns fossil fuels for a machine that does the same job but is powered by electricity instead. So switching a gas burning furnace, water heater, clothes dryer, or oven for an electric one. Sometimes electrification can happen at a scale beyond just a single building, though, because, for instance, some colleges have what is called district heating. And that's where a central facility generates heat for multiple buildings. Around here, those district systems are often gas burning. But replacing the gas system with an electric heat pump or geothermal district system can be a big project with a big payoff. Now, sometimes you can do both efficiency upgrades and electrification at once. For example, if you switch from a gas furnace to an electric heat pump, you simultaneously get both electrification and significantly better efficiency. Ditto for switching from a gas stove to an electric induction stove. Now, the final part of decarbonization is to ensure that the electricity used to power all of those highly efficient electric machines comes from a clean power source. Now, that might involve putting solar panels on the roof or participating in a community solar program. An even bigger project, which would require a lot more collaboration, would be getting your nearest coal-burning power plant decommissioned and replaced by, let's say, a wind farm. Any one of these three can be great on its own, but implementing these strategies together can be a game changer for our communities. Not only does building decarbonization substantially reduce emissions, as we'll see shortly, it also has major financial and health benefits. Notably, gas appliances emit various pollutants and known carcinogens. These include carbon monoxide, particulate matter, and formaldehyde, which is why children living in homes with gas stoves are 42% more likely to suffer asthma symptoms than kids in homes with electric stoves. So getting the gas appliances out of our buildings reduces the risk of asthma and other respiratory problems, as well as certain cancers. The same reasons why many of us don't let people smoke cigarettes in our houses are also reasons not to burn fossil fuels in our homes and businesses. Now, equally important are the financial savings of decarbonization. Customers who electrify their home heating and cooling systems can save over $850 every year, or up to $2,800 per building per year when combined with other decarbonization measures, like that insulation stuff. In fact, building a fully electric new single-family home without gas or propane pipelines from the start can reduce the construction costs of that home by over $7,500. It also makes energy costs more predictable over time. It's less volatile than relying on gas. And the Inflation Reduction Act incentives make decarbonization projects cheaper than they've ever been before. Moreover, building decarbonization creates good jobs. Most of these jobs are related to electrification, and most don't require higher education, but 80% of these jobs do provide healthcare, and annual wages for these positions average from over $57,000 to over $83,000 a year, depending on the position. Now, last but not least, in addition to these other great co-benefits, the potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions through building decarbonization here in Chicago is huge. And that's because about 70% of all emissions in Chicago come from buildings. For some context, in the state of Illinois, only 22% of emissions come from buildings, and nationally, 29% of emissions do. Even more notable is that when we focus on the emissions that come from energy usage in Chicago buildings, it's estimated that 20% of that energy is wasted. Let's let that sink in. I have a lot of feelings when I encounter statistics like that. And I bet some of you do too. So I'm going to do something I used to do in my classes. I'm going to encourage you to post an emoji in the chat right now, or simply, if you'd prefer, make a face into your camera to express how this makes you feel. For me, these statistics make me feel like this, which is a sort of anger disgust hybrid. Showing our emotions and knowing that we aren't alone in our feelings about the climate crisis can energize us sometimes and unify us sometimes. So thanks to everybody who is willing to share. There are lots of reactions you might have to these kinds of statistics, and they're all valid and understandable. One of the best ways to deal with negative climate-related emotions that you might feel is to band together with others and do something about the causes of those feelings. So whether we take action to help us deal with our own feelings about climate, or whether we do it for our loved ones or for future generations. Yeah, I'm seeing these sad, crying, angry faces in the chat. Yeah. Whether we do climate activism for the marginalized communities that are most harmed by climate chaos, or for whatever other reason, the fact remains that to achieve the goals in Chicago's 2022 Climate Action Plan, including the commitment to reduce climate pollution 62% by 2040, we simply must reduce emissions from buildings. To be more specific, on this slide, I hope you can see some screen grabs of some of the building decarbonization goals that are explicitly mentioned in our city's climate action plan. And speaking of the city, let's now turn to item number 3 on our agenda. The need to decarbonize our buildings has been recognized on some level by the city since 2012. That's when what's now known as the Retrofit Chicago Energy Challenge was first launched. As these screenshots show, over 10 years, the building retrofits supported by this program have saved millions of kilowatt hours of electricity and hundreds of thousands of tons of greenhouse gas emissions. Now, under past achievements on the retrofit webpage, you can see case studies for particular buildings that have undergone retrofits, including buildings at UIC, Northwestern, DePaul, and the University of Chicago. I know we've got some folks in the Zoom room representing these different schools. Now, all 4 of these university buildings highlighted on this slide reduced their energy usage by 20%, and they cut their emissions by a quarter to a half through these decarbonization retrofits. Relatedly, in 2013, the Chicago Energy Benchmarking Ordinance passed, which requires that all owners of large buildings, that is, buildings with at least 50,000 square feet, of which there are over 3,500, all the owners of these large buildings must report certain information about their building's energy usage and emissions to the city every year. And they must have that data verified every 3 years. And the city's data portal makes all of that information publicly available. Now, this ordinance only requires the reporting of data. It doesn't require anyone to do any decarbonization activities. But in the reporting process, many large building owners and managers have discovered ways to work toward decarbonization. So from 2016 to 2020, median emissions intensity, that is emissions per square foot, in the large buildings that reported their data went down 25%. And that's progress. But we've got a long way to go. In fact, when we turn from emissions to energy use, if you focus on what I've highlighted in the green box here, you'll see that the college and university sector was one of only two to actually increase energy use per square foot between 2016 and 2020. And while it's not a big increase, that was a move in the wrong direction. So these are some basics about the landscape here in Chicago and what building decarbonization is. I think we should maybe pause for some questions now. So if anyone wants to raise their digital hand, if you want to ask one verbally, or if my teammates Joe and Florida need to unmute and let me know if there are any in the chat that need attention. This is a time to pause and take questions if need be.
We have no questions so far, but I think we can, we'll continue to monitor. And please feel free to use the chat to add your question, or at this moment, feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question.
Thanks for watching the chat for me, Florida. If we don't have any questions, we'll have many more opportunities as we go. So maybe we'll move forward to item number 4 on our agenda. So how did my team get fired up about building decarbonization in the first place? Well, we simply would not be here now without my teammate, Victor Kovas. He is the mastermind behind the website, electrifychicago.net. And I'll ask my friend Jeremy to share the link for electrifychicago.net in the chat with you right now so you can take a look if you want. What this site does is take the huge, clunky, publicly available spreadsheet with all that city energy benchmarking data, and it presents it in a much cleaner and more accessible, easily sortable and digestible way for the general public. Victor is constantly tinkering with the site to make it even more useful, but its core functionality is always to allow us to easily look for patterns in the data and search for specific buildings. So the site is currently displaying data from 2021, though the update to 2022 data is in the works. I'm going to show you some screenshots from the website to give you a sense of some of the site's key features. So for instance, if you scroll down on the home page, it shows the worst buildings in the city, the worst large buildings in terms of greenhouse gas intensity. So that is emissions per square foot, because emissions per square foot is the best way to compare apples to apples rather than apples to oranges when you're concerned about climate impacts. And you can click on any building's name to go to a page that puts that specific building's data in contexts and includes things like the building's estimated gas and electric bills when that kind of thing is possible to calculate. But you can also use the links at the top of the page to sort by, let's say, total emissions or cleanest buildings. Particularly important for us might be the one for large building owners. This page lists just some of the big owners, like universities, and on each of those, you can see a summary of data from all the large buildings on that particular campus. So for instance, you can see here that in the year 2021, the first, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh most greenhouse gas intensive large buildings in Chicago were all owned and operated by IIT. Not good. So what I want to do now is give y'all maybe about 3 minutes to just explore the site, electrifychicago.net. Maybe you want to look up the address of a dorm where you live, or a building where you take classes regularly, or where you eat dinner or whatever. Or maybe you just want to see some of the best and worst performers in the city as a whole. Let's just take the next 3 minutes to poke around. And when we come back together, I'll give a few folks a chance to share anything interesting that they noticed or any questions that came up about the site. Okay, Trudy's asking, could I reshare the stats regarding cost savings? They're not really on this slide. So what I'm going to do, Trudy, at the end of the hour, I've got a form that folks can fill out if they want to express interest or get more information. And I'm going to ask that you fill out the form and make a note in the other section, and I can get back to you with those stats. I can send you an email directly with all of those stats. And in fact, I can expand on them a little bit. Does that sound good? Yeah, just make sure to get my email at the end or fill out that form, and I can easily send you an email tomorrow.
Rachel, we have one more question in the chat.
Okay,
From
great.
Matthew.
Okay. Feel free to keep looking at the site for another minute if you want, but I'm going to go ahead and field this question from Matthew Paul Alonso. Matthew asks, when the data from a building is reported, does it include separate accounts? Like for a condo, like is it all the individual units each, or is it the building as a whole? And that's a great question. Thanks for asking that, Matthew. Generally, it's for the building as a whole that the data is reported. Now, for some of these buildings like condos where there's multiple accounts that are in different people's names, sometimes there has to be some estimation being done by the person in charge of the building who is delegated to report the data to the city. So there is some room for estimation in the cases where there's lots of account holders, but the building ordinance does outline a procedure for how to gather the data across multiple account holders and do an estimate if some amount is missing. So generally, it's for the building as a whole. In a few instances, there's a way to do an estimation when some account information may not be available. I hope that clarifies it. The ordinance itself is a little complicated, but yes, it's buildings as a whole. Okay, great. Any other questions or things that people noticed that jumped out to you as interesting or surprising about the data you found? Seems like people are more in an explore mode than a report mode, but if anybody wants to report, go ahead and unmute. And if not, we'll move along. Okay, so I asked you if you had noticed anything surprising or interesting about what you saw. Well, when making this site, my buddy Victor noticed something about his alma mater, IIT, which was a pattern of very high emitting, energy intensive buildings. So Victor brought that to the attention of our climate reality team and thereby provided us with both an amazing tool, this website, and the inspiration to learn more and get to work, both planning this event and drafting a report about our findings. So we started with the 2020 data, focused on just one IIT building, specifically Keating Hall. So while sometimes there's a good reason for a building to be extra energy intensive, like for instance, if the building is a hospital or a research lab or a data center with lots of complex equipment, it's going to have higher energy usage and emissions in a way that makes sense. However, Keating Hall, and I'm displaying some numbers on the screen about this, Keating Hall is a gym. And we just aren't seeing any way to justify the horrible numbers that IIT was reporting back in 2020. So Keating seems to us like a great candidate for decarbonization, that we could really achieve a lot if we decarbonized Keating. Unfortunately, when we reached out to ask for more information about Keating and to offer any help that we could, IIT ignored us. But that didn't stop us. It just motivated us to think about how to mobilize university community members beyond those in leadership positions. We decided to focus on colleges and universities as a group because they own a lot of buildings, including some of the highest emitting and most energy intensive buildings in the whole city. We also have data for lots of higher education buildings, though not all of them, because some are too small to be covered by the ordinance, some are outside city limits, and in some cases, the self-reported data may not be complete. On a similarly practical level, focusing on just colleges and universities and focusing just on the ones that we have data for helps us keep the size of our project manageable, given the capacity of our existing team. Another relevant factor is that colleges and universities often talk the talk about sustainability, even though they don't always walk the walk. Thankfully, students, faculty, staff, alumni, and other community members are well positioned to pressure university administrators in ways that can lead to positive change. That said, there are some hurdles that come with trying to make change in higher education, and it's worth briefly mentioning a few of them here. The first is the fact that change does not come for free. Decarbonization, although it saves quite a bit of money in the long run, does require spending some time, money, and other resources in the short term. So confronting these costs head on is really important. You might be able to help with that by maybe volunteering your labor to help shape a decarbonization plan. Or it might involve you searching out financing for efficiency upgrades and electrification or something else. The second noteworthy hurdle is that both institutions and individual activists have competing priorities. Many schools, unfortunately, are in a sort of perpetual crisis, whether it's budget cuts or scandals or unplanned expenses or something else. It can feel to university leadership that there's always some more pressing emergency to deal with. And so it can be hard to get and keep attention focused on what you care about. And at the individual level, there are always competing priorities too. Even if you aren't having a personal emergency, you surely have plenty going on in your life that requires attention. But given the realities of climate change, we need as many people as possible to keep up the pressure to work toward collective solutions. Every person, and maybe more importantly, every institution can contribute something. Now, the third hurdle to discuss is student turnover, and to some extent, turnover of faculty, staff, and leadership, because this turnover means that sometimes with larger scale initiatives, like building decarbonization, sometimes it isn't until folks are about to leave the university that they find out about a certain problem or figure out how to make progress on solving it. And sometimes people in power take advantage of that cyclical turnover and stall or slow walk projects to kind of wait out the people and ideas that they would rather not deal with. So campus activists need to have and implement plans to ensure that when they graduate, others know what they've already done and are ready to step right up and continue pushing for progress. That's part of why we reached out to student groups. Even if you personally are near graduation, as a group member, you can get mechanisms in place to help keep up the work after you've moved on. And we at the Climate Reality Project Chicago Metro chapter would love to support y'all in pursuing change on your campuses, whether you want to do that fairly autonomously in your pre-existing groups, or you want to do it in coalition with each other across multiple campuses, whether you want to join in my team's ongoing work, or maybe you've got an idea for something else. We are open to suggestions and requests. And we really think that collaborative partnerships can be a beautiful thing in this kind of effort. And with that in mind, we're ready for number 5 on our agenda, projects in the works. To get us started on this, I'd like to pass the mic to Parveen Karamundi, the president of the Student Government Association at DePaul, who'll have the floor for 5 minutes to share about what they've been working on recently. So I'm going to say, take it away, Parveen.
Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Parveen. I'm a junior this year, but I'm also DePaul Student Body President this year. So I definitely empathize with what you were sharing about competing interests, just turnover in general, and just making sure that the work that we're doing with student organizations and the student body as a whole continues. Just a little bit about me. I study political science, but my minors are in Mandarin and Global Asian Studies. So the reason why I really empathize with the local action that this chapter of the Climate Reality Project is doing is because I think the climate crisis is something that affects all of us. And I think it affects people intersectionally as well. So I will share, and I'm not sure if you have it on the next slide, but on February 13th, myself, my vice president, and my chief of staff, we co-authored a letter to our university president who started last school year, basically asking that this 2011 plan that was kind of a mystery as to whether benchmarks had been met, action that had taken place since then, something that was severely outdated, be updated and be effectively recommission the creation of a campus climate plan. So at my university, in our Student Government Association, we do have some infrastructure for sustainability. One thing, namely, being that we, in a past iteration of student government, asked for a President's Sustainability Committee to be created. So although it's more so steered by the university president. That was something that was created through SGA's advocacy, and so we have consistent representation there. And we actually managed to get a response to our letter pretty immediately, I think because it was an open letter. So on February 17th, we received a response from the university president basically saying, I think we came in at a good time, like in a good moment where President Manuel was looking to kind of define what DePaul's focus on environmental sustainability was going to be, and we had this ask. And so it seems like that's kind of going to be included. I think a few points of note from the letter included that he's basically asking our vice president for facility operations to begin leading this effort. And so a couple things he noted were like engaging the expertise of an external firm, also just inviting student government, Just DePaul, which I believe there's a representative here, and the President's Sustainability Committee, the whole DePaul community to kind of join in this initiative. He also highlighted that he includes environmental sustainability in the interdisciplinary initiatives that he's hoping to start up with faculty. So doing more so like research and things like that focused on sustainability as a whole. In terms of my thoughts, I'm really glad we were able to do this and just put the ask out. And I was expecting a bit more pushback, but it seems like there's some interest in kind of recommissioning a new plan that fits the modern challenges and considers DePaul's position as a contributor to climate emissions and the climate crisis and the effect that we have on our campus community. Also because DePaul, I'm not sure how much of you keep up with like our university, but I know there's been a lot of conversation about building like a new athletics facility and things like that. So just considering the impact that we continue to have on the landscape and the space around us. Things are moving quickly. I'm aware that a group is starting to get together, which SGA I expect will have a stake in, to start talking about these kinds of commission things. I think President Rob's choice of Rich Wiltsey, the facility operations vice president, I think he's a good choice because his work relates directly to how DePaul's physical facilities run. I will say, and I'm really curious to be able to engage with like peer institutions. I'm always personally wary of like external professional firms. I have a little hesitation, but I'm optimistic. I just want to make sure that I don't want the work to basically fall on students to ideate something. So it's a little assuring to see that the university has the intent of investing into a firm, but I still want to make sure at the end of the day that input from our student stakeholders, the local community, just shared governance at DePaul is still included, irrespective of what the work that this firm may be doing, who this firm is, things like that. I also think I would like to see a bit more personal investment from President Rob. So I'm aware that there's like university infrastructure that my student government, long before I was here, asked for the sustainability committee, and that's technically under his purview. But I would like to, I don't want this to be something that's just kind of delegated within his cabinet and passed over. So I'm still looking for that, but I'm really curious to see what other peer institutions are doing. But right now, I'm pretty optimistic that we'll at least be able to get started on commissioning, you know, an updated climate plan that understands the realities and challenges and the implications that our campus presence has on the broader community in Chicago. So I'm pretty excited, but I can probably drop my email if any student groups want to keep in contact. But yeah, thank you so much.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for all of your amazing work, Parveen, and of course, everyone else who's involved in this effort at DePaul. I'm sure it's lots and lots of people. I really love that in your open letter, you've been really explicit about mentioning the commitments the university had already made, so that you're holding administrators accountable for exactly where they've fallen short and identifying paths forward. Influencing people in position of power does require this kind of sustained attention and pressure. You know, we can't just let folks get away with it when they drop the ball. So major kudos to Parveen and her whole team of folks at DePaul. So we're going to use the rest of our time to think and share about possible next steps. Part of the goal for tonight was just to give some basic education about building decarbonization generally and in Chicago on campuses specifically. But the other goal is to start building relationships with students, either individually or in groups, folks who might want to continue working with us toward building decarbonization in one way or another, to be determined collaboratively. Now, on-campus projects could include things like identifying funding sources for building decarb projects, publishing in the campus newspaper or maybe alumni magazine, or holding a press conference to educate and ramp up issue visibility. You might circulate a petition or craft a social media campaign to show broad support for decarbonization. You could organize a rally, demonstration, vigil, sit-in, or other public performance to demand action or to hold administrators accountable. You could even complete a related class project, like depending on what classes you're in, you might be able to figure out how to decarbonize a specific building and get course credit. Or, and this would be bringing in the big guns, you might try to mobilize donors who aren't totally satisfied with the status quo to use their leverage as donors on the powers that be. Alternatively, you may be interested in extending your connections beyond campus. So let me mention a couple projects at various stages already in the works that you might be interested in contributing to. First, my team is working on a report about climate change, building decarbonization, and Chicago higher education campuses. It covers a lot of the ground we've covered here and more, with many links to sources, and we're pitching this report to college students, faculty, staff, and administrators in leadership positions. We'd be happy to get feedback and help finalizing this document, or we'd be happy to simply share it with any interested student groups when we're done with it. Second, while doing our research, we've grown somewhat concerned about the enforcement of the citywide energy benchmarking ordinance, which we think leaves much to be desired. So we have some interest in doing some further research and shedding light on and trying to improve the enforcement of that existing ordinance so that the city isn't working with incomplete benchmarking data or leaving what might be a significant amount of money in fines on the table. But we have more thinking to do about whether and how to proceed on that. Now, third, and again at the city level, a proposal for a clean and affordable buildings ordinance, aka CABO, was introduced to City Council in January, and we at Climate Reality and over 50 other consumer, community, faith, environmental, and environmental justice organizations have all been working together in coalition to support it. CABO would establish an emissions standard for new buildings and major renovation projects, which would limit the use of natural gas. Now, the last I heard, which was about 2 weeks ago, we had the support of the mayor and 18 of the 26 alderpersons we need to pass CABO. And people closer to it than I am seem optimistic that it will pass, but it's definitely not a done deal. So the coalition is working hard to get it over the finish line. In fact, there's a subject matter hearing on CABO scheduled for Wednesday, April 3rd at 10:30 a.m. at the City Council chambers downtown. And it would be great to have a huge turnout of supporters. So now I'll have my buddy Jeremy share a couple more links in the chat, one with more info about CABO, one that helps you quickly contact your alderperson in support of CABO, and one to RSVP to attend the subject matter hearing on April 3rd. Finally, just a heads up that a coalition with some of the same players is working at the state level to draft legislation that's being called a clean heat bill, which would be a step in the decarbonization process for Illinois as a whole. So this is a longer term project, but I just thought y'all might want to have it on your radar. So I'll ask Jeremy to put a link in the chat with some more information about that as well. Now for the last agenda item, let's really get our brain juices flowing. Are there any other ideas for advancing building decarbonization that we should be considering? Or are there any projects that you've already got going on your campus or off, or any kinds of relevant expertise that maybe you could contribute that we should all know about? Feel free to raise your digital hand to share them verbally, or post them in the chat if you've got any ideas. The floor is open for thoughts about how to collaborate and how to work together productively. And it's totally okay if you're in pondering mode rather than sharing mode right now, but it looks like Trudy has a hand raised. So Trudy, why don't you take it away first?
Hi, I have a couple of things. First of all, thank you so much for hosting this. This is really great. And I just want to say regarding some of the suggestions that you made for students to do as far as like starting a petition, working to publish articles in the newspaper, things like that. I just want to say that sorry, I'm from Eco DePaul. We're
Okay.
a newer environmental organization at DePaul. And I just want to say that we are definitely open to working with, just DePaul and the student government on those sort of things. And like, if we can, get together, do a meeting, that sort of stuff, we are definitely would love to work together on those things. Something that Eco DePaul has sort of in the background, just because we haven't had like a ton of time to put together a group of students that are specifically focused on this, but we do have a green dorm certification. Um, yeah, a green dorm certification project that we are hoping to start as soon as we get enough people who are specifically interested in implementing that. That just entails students in the dorms would be able to voluntarily participate, and it focuses on energy, waste, water, transportation, and civic engagement. So of course, a big part of that is energy use in the buildings. And I just wanted to put that out there if anyone's interested in specifically working on that, but that could definitely fall under, decarbonization. And hopefully part of that project will be sharing this sort of information with students living in the dorms and helping them to advocate to, the people in housing for more energy efficient practices in the dorms. But yeah, definitely, I can reach out to student government and just to Paul and see what we can get going as far as the things that you mentioned.
Thank you so much, Trudy, and all the folks at Eco DePaul. That sounds like really cool work. Maybe I'll just suggest, if you're comfortable, Trudy, you might put your email in the chat so that other DePaul folks know how to contact you about that Eco DePaul work. Thank you so much for sharing about that. It looks like we've got another hand from, I'm sorry, I don't know if it's Evie or Evie. Go ahead and unmute and
it's Evie.
Evie, okay.
Hi everyone. Thank you, Trudy, for jumping in on this. I work with Trudy. I'm also from DePaul, and I'm a team member at Just DePaul. I'm the Student Sustainability Network Weaver, and I'm also a member of the President's Sustainability Committee. And I just wanted to kind of jump on here and say that one of the things that I've been talking about a lot at some of our events and also meetings has been reaching out to other schools. And I just wanted to say thank you for allowing us to be a platform for us to do that. Obviously, with the information that you guys gave us, DePaul has, I think, 6 high emitters on our campus, and that's obviously super concerning and not great. So we kind of have been wanting to reach out to other student groups, student organizations related to sustainability or environmental justice, and just kind of have like a brainstorm, talk about what's going on, what each other are doing at our schools on our different campuses. And so if any of you guys from other universities would be interested in doing that, I can definitely drop my email and we can get something going. I think it would be a really productive conversation to have, and one that's also necessary. I think that this should be something that we're all working on together. It doesn't have to be a competition, and it doesn't have to be something that divides our higher ed institutions. It should be something that's bringing us together as students who are passionate about this. So I will drop my email in the chat. please feel free to reach out to me. I would definitely love to get things going, especially with SGA. I know the PSC already has some things going on with SGA, but I would definitely love to get more engagement, especially as we're working on, starting to come up with an action plan.
Cool. Thank you so much, Evie. That's great. If I'm remembering correctly, you're from Just DePaul, and maybe other groups too. So it's nice to see multiple groups getting a chance to see some overlap in their work. And I think you're exactly right that we don't have to be competing. This is something we can all work on together. So that's super cool. I'm just checking the chat to see if anybody is wanting to put a comment there, or if there's any other hands. Okay, Ruben from Just DePaul says, Ruben's had several one-on-ones that have taught them about the importance of expanding default vegetarian options as another strategy to reduce carbon emissions. I am right there. If you want help with that, Ruben, let me know, contact me. I'm right on your team with that one. Default vegetarianism is great. So that's rad. Any other things that folks want to share? Questions they want to ask? This has all been really wonderful. Before we wrap, because we are coming up on 5 minutes to the hour and I want to be respectful of everyone's time, I want to highlight some immediate next steps. One easy way that everyone here can take a step in the right direction is to share something that you learned this evening with someone who didn't join us, whatever that might be, whoever that might be. If you're willing to consider doing a bit more, you can fill out the form that Jeremy will add a link to in the chat, and that'll indicate your interest in various different kinds of activities that we've mentioned here tonight on the call. And you can fill it out as an individual or as part of a student group. We'll collect some basic contact info and get in touch as we coordinate things moving forward. In particular, I want to invite anyone who's interested to join my team's monthly meetings. We meet for 1 hour over Zoom each month on the 4th Monday at 7 p.m. and all are welcome. Jeremy can put the Zoom link for monthly team meetings in the chat too. And last but not least, I want to share my slides in the chat, which I will share to everyone. The slides have a lot of links that you might want to follow up on if you're doing research or working in this space. And of course, I just want to thank y'all for being here. I'm going to hang around for a few minutes after we close, just in case anybody wants to ask any questions or chat with me, not in a way that's recording or a way that's less formal. So I'll just share my email address and the email address of our chapter in the chat in case anybody wants to be in touch in the future. And I'll thank you all. Hope you have a great night.